The next one, I'm going to have to sit for this, is context-setting cover story for instruction. And what this really is about is priming the pump with your learners to make them ready to receive the information that you regularly would have just delivered to them in a regular way, right? You're setting them up to be receptive for the message that you're about to deliver. The best example of this, in the spirit of full disclosure, this presentation was created in large part when I was with my previous employer, which is Tacit Interactive Systems. We did some work for a hospital just up the street, NewYork-Presbyterian Hospital, who's having a little bit of a fire safety training issue, right? They had 19,000 employees. They had to regularly and annually get through a fire safety training program. And they had it down to a pretty well-oiled machine. You know, they had a group of people come in on Monday morning and they go through the training, and Wednesday afternoon, you know, they'd be done, and the next group would come in Wednesday afternoon and they go through and turn the crank, right? In and out. 19,000 employees every year in a classroom situation. And they had evaluations that were in place, and people were doing okay. People were passing grades on these assessments, getting the check marks. Everything looked good from a classroom perspective. The problem was that was only one half of what they needed to worry about. The other half was that they had Joint Commission and safety people from New York City pop up randomly, go to a random building on a random day, go to a random floor, pick a random employee, and say, a fire just broke out, what do you do? And they had to be able to answer right on the spot what they would do. And they were failing miserably. When the rubber hit the road and they were being confronted with a realistic situation that they had to confront, they looked like deer in headlights. They didn't know what to do. So they came to us, we rethought the problem, we said, you know, what we need to do is kind of put this all in a context that's familiar to people. Tell them a story about a fire event, and then talk about all the facts and figures associated with the compliance training. So, this is that training. And what we did, let's see if I can do this. So you start off, and you have the obligatory, navigation help that you can skip if you want. And you also get the obligatory welcome message from the muckety-muck up in the high office. It says, this is important stuff, and please pay attention, and thank you for participating. Then we go through a few screens of interaction to kind of set the groundwork of the context of the instruction. And their model for firefighting and fire safety was based on this acronym called RACE. It stands for Rescue, Alarm, Confine, Extinguish, and Evacuate. All right? And every time you get into a fire situation, you need to think RACE and act appropriately. Now, the way that we decided to attack this from an instructional point of view is to say, let's tell the story of a fire that broke out in the hospital, and kind of in the vein of 24, or some of those television shows where you see the same event from different perspectives. We're going to retell you the same fire story 4 different times, but we're going to tell it from different employees' perspectives. And each of those employees represent one letter of the RACE acronym. Okay? So but it all gets kicked off with a little welcome message from one of the HR directors. We meet the characters. You've got nurses and doctors and maintenance men all playing a role. And we kick off with a meeting that's being held to congratulate these people. You get to a main menu. You've got Polaroids of the different characters. You have an indication below each Polaroid whether you have not started their story, have started but stopped it, or if you've seen their whole story completely. Each of their personalities are tied to one of the letters of the RACE acronym. There's a push pin up top. I skipped over. There's a pre-assessment element that allows you to take a test. And if you indicate through your performance on that test that you already know everything there is to talk about confine, now I'm not going to make you take that module. That push pin will not say mandatory. It'll say optional. But you can look at it, too, because it's a cool story, right? So you're able to go in any order that you want and hear any story that you want. So we'll go up to Carmelita, who has the alarm portion. And you can see up in the corner here, the A is highlighted in the race acronym so that we remember that. And we jump right in with what her perspective was on the story.
A cloud of smoke was coming into the room from the hall. I was surprised that I didn't hear the fire alarm. Code red! Code red!
What's wrong?
I asked another nurse to start moving the patients beyond the fire and smoke doors. I was going to pull the alarm. Amy, Juan, code red! Code red! I wondered where the fire might be. Was it this floor? Was it the floor below?
So it's a fairly short story. It's about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes long. All's well that ends well. She ran through it. But you saw the thread of her actions, seeing the smoke, not hearing any alarms, so that means that she's probably one of the first to notice it. Calling out code red, going towards the pole station. You saw the whole arc of the story from her perspective, and it's related to the alarm element of the RACE acronym. Now that's screen 2 of 13, right? As you move forward, this is where their traditional training started. This is slide number 1 of their classroom training, the importance of alarms. And you go through and how to sound the alarm and where they're located, and you can listen to what they sound like and how it sounds different if it's on your floor versus on another floor. Right? So this is all the kind of facts and figures that you traditionally associate with fire safety training. But we tell it to them after they've heard the context-setting cover story. So now they've got a reason and a connection point to say, pulling the station, shouting code red, enlisting the help of people that are on the floor with you. Suddenly it all makes sense. And now when confronted by Joint Commission people, random floor, random day, fire broke out, what do? They go, I remember Dr. Eddie Barton. I remember, Carmelita and what she did. And I've got a hook in terms of what I should do in a context that's familiar to me. Right? Does that all make sense? Okay, good. So, the use of storytelling to kind of prime the pump and get people ready so that they're more receptive and more able to understand the more traditional instruction if you don't want to go whole hog into building the whole course as a story-based course. It gives you an easy way to get things started in the right way. Okay. Got about 12 more minutes and we're on the last one. I love that I've actually managed my time properly. It doesn't always happen. So the last example is about knowledge sharing as either a repository or a resource and the way stories can fit in that model. And if you think about your organization, consider what it is that your company values. When you're recruiting for new people, what are you looking for in those people? And put a little finer point on it. If you had to justify your salary, what is it that makes you worth what you get paid every month? I bet you a dime to a dollar that it's probably not the stuff that you could write down and give to somebody else who just came in wet behind the ears from college, and they'd be able to do too. Right? It's not that kind of stuff that makes you worth what you're worth. It's not the high-valued things within an organization. It's something else. Right? It's the experience you bring to the table. It's the je ne sais quoi of your expertise. And what this drives to is really the 2 different kinds of knowledge that most people recognize, even back in the early 60s, was written about. That there's explicit knowledge stuff that you can codify, write down, put in a bullet point chart, put in a job aid, put in a document. Somebody can read it and go, okay, I can do that. You just follow the recipe, and out comes a successful event on the other side, right? The other kind of knowledge is a little bit more fuzzy. It's not explicit knowledge, it's implicit knowledge. It's tacit knowledge. This is the stuff that high-performance expertise or experts exhibit almost unconsciously. It's what they do naturally, unconsciously. And if you corner these people and you ask them how they do what they do, 9 times out of 10 they say, I have no idea. I just do it. Michael Jordan, how did you do what you did? I dribbled. It's very difficult to get that kind of knowledge from an expert into a novice because it, by definition, isn't the kind of information that you can write down. It doesn't fit that kind of an instructional model. Quick example. We've all ridden bikes, right? Everybody knows how to ride a bike? You don't know how to ride a bike? Raise your hand. Oh, come on. Really? You don't know how to ride a bike? Okay. Well, for those of you that do, and maybe we can come up with another example for those of you that don't, imagine that you're riding a bike, cruise along, you want to make a left-hand turn. Okay? Pretty simple. Do you pull the left handlebar towards you, or do you pull the right handlebar towards you? I'll assume nobody's riding unicycles. Want to turn left, which handlebar do you pull towards you? Left. Left, of course. All right? Actually, it doesn't. As unintuitive as it may sound, to turn left, you pull the right handlebar towards you. Well, the question was, which one do you pull, right? And you've been riding bikes for years, right? You've become so adept and expert at the process that you don't even know how you make a left-hand turn. I know it sounds crazy, but give it a try. And the way you figure it out is tie shoestrings or rope on either side of the handlebar. You can't push a rope, right? You can only pull a rope. And try and make a left-hand turn. You'll pull on the right shoestring. There's a website, John Seeley Brown, who wrote The Social Life of Information. That's where I pulled this from. It's a fantastically counterintuitive example of tacit knowledge, something we do unconsciously, and we don't even know how we do it. It's kind of fun. So, in a very brief period of time, when you talk about tacit and explicit knowledge transfer from an expert to a novice, there are only a handful of ways that you can do it. The classic 2x2 matrix every consultant in the world uses, right? Explicit to explicit is the stuff we all know. This is our stock and trade as designers and trainers. Here's something that's easily written down that I know, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to give it to somebody else, and you're going to read it, and you're going to know how to do it now. Easy enough. Explicit to tacit, called internalization, is when you do something over and over and over again to the point that it becomes unconscious. Right? It goes from being a list of 5 steps that I'm consciously executing to do whatever it is I need to do to just being in action, a natural flow. Right? Tacit to explicit is very difficult. It's called externalization. And you get there by going through a long series of questions and answers and interviews with experts to tease out of their head how they do what they do. Oftentimes if you explicitly say, how do you do what you do, they say, I have no idea. But if you say, tell me a situation where you were amazingly successful, you fell on your face, you were completely confused, and how did you get out of that? Suddenly they begin telling stories, and the gestalt of what the lesson is begins to emerge. They couldn't have told you directly, but through a story they can begin to enunciate that. And the last quadrant, tacit to tacit, something that's incredibly difficult to do, right? And this is done through what's called in the trade socialization, and that's the apprenticeship model of getting in and practicing and doing and modeling somebody that's an expert at whatever it is that you're concentrating on, to the point that you're able to just mimic that behavior. And you do that, again, through modeling and interaction and discussion. It's a very hands-on, long-range approach. And as you move up and to the right, it gets harder to transfer on a regular and confident basis. When you think about those 4 quadrants and where stories apply the best, it's up in that tacit range. Stories work everywhere, but they really are especially powerful up in that top range. Okay? Internalization is where simulation is really particularly effective. It allows you to practice and learn by doing to the point that it becomes unconscious. Okay. So the reason that this is kind of in vogue, and I wanted to talk about it briefly in the last few minutes, is there's a lot of talk in the press about the baby boom generation retiring. Right? Goes by a lot of different names. As an example of what the cost of lost or unmanaged knowledge is, you can think about NASA again, and talk about space. In the mid-'90s, they went through a whole downsizing effort and let a lot of their engineers go to save a little bit of money. And as a result, there was a tremendous amount of know-how that walked out the door. In fact, it was so bad, if we wanted to go to the moon tomorrow, we wouldn't know how to do it. Speaking a little grandly, there are a lot of bright people in NASA, but the fact of the matter is that the blueprints for the Saturn V booster rocket is the biggest piece of engineering technology that humans have undergone practically. The last set of blueprints for that, lost. We don't have them anymore. It was all in the heads of the engineers that were part of the space shot, and they've all retired or died or moved on. Right? Gone. Poof. Take a look at some of these statistics about what's right around the corner because of this baby boom generation retirement issue. This is downright scary. Especially, I assume most of us took planes to get here. 93% of air traffic controllers, and this is a job that takes years to become proficient at. This isn't something you go to a class and a month later you're certified and blessed, right? This is something that takes like 5 to 7 years to become proficient at. 93% of them are going to be gone by the year 2011. It gives you a real warm feeling about getting on a plane, doesn't it? When you look at the percentage change by population and age group by 2013, you're going to see that the prime worker, mid-30 to mid-40s, it's going to drop by 10%. People in their mid-50s to mid-60s is going to go up by 40%. This is a problem. It's a huge problem. And it's not just a matter of number of bodies and how many people are in the workforce. It's a question of knowledgeable and qualified bodies. It's a question of what are the average number of years of experience in-house that you're able to leverage to, make your money, to turn your products out, to deliver your services, right? The connection here with stories is that if you can get your experts cornered and get them to start telling you tales of success and failure, suddenly you've got a huge leg up on this brain drain. Now when new people come in, they say, how do I fix this problem? You've got a virtual library of the best people who have ever worked in your organization who can tell you tales and teach tacitly how to solve those kinds of problems. Right? So knowledge retention, knowledge communication is another way that stories are very, very effective in a way that traditional instruction just simply falls flat. Okay, so 4 ways that we potentially can use stories within our instructional designs to be more effective. Now, I don't want to lead anybody astray and suggest that there's some kind of silver bullet answer to every problem. Just as I said at the beginning, there are particular tools that you should use to achieve particular goals. What I'm suggesting is that stories are a tool that ought to be in your tool chest. You shouldn't use it all the time like you shouldn't use a hammer all the time. But when the job is right, it's particularly effective. Some areas where it really works well: regulatory and compliance training, stuff that's boring and dry and you have to do, and nobody cares, right? How can you make it compelling and relevant and memorable? Tell some stories. New hire orientation about the history, the culture of the company, soft skills, stuff that is a little bit squishy, a little more art than science. Stories are terrific. Places where it doesn't work quite so well, stuff lower down on the cognitive ladder. You're teaching definitions and facts and procedures. Teach your facts and definitions and procedures and send them on their way. Give them a job aid. Let them go. There's no reason to cut a stick of butter with a chainsaw. Right? So, to tie it all up, put stories into your instructional design. You're going to improve upon the three legs of good instruction: comprehension, retention, and application. I really, really appreciate the time you've invested today, and I'm certainly available to take any questions. I know I ran right to the minute, but I'll stay up here as long as I need to stay up here to answer any questions you might have. You got my email address if you're on your way out. And I'd implore you, please, to just take a few minutes. You've gotten pretty good at it by now, of filling out the evaluation form, so I can have some feedback about how I did today and improve for the next group. Thank you.